Hello. Today, you're going to learn Claire's story. For years, she has lived in the shadows, ignored, underestimated. But now, she's about to turn the tables and reveal the truth that could destroy everything. Get ready, because what's coming is going to surprise you. She always arrived before the lights came on, before the elevators sighed awake, before the first espresso hissed in the executive lounge. Claire Dawson walked those marble floors like a ghost with a purpose. Her heels barely made a sound. Her presence barely left a trace. For 9 years, she was William Hargrove's personal secretary, founder of Hargrove Health Systems, a hospital empire whispered about in elite circles and political fundraisers. To the outside world, Claire was a fixture. To the people around her, she was furniture. Blonde hair tied back, face clean, tired. Her suits outdated but neat, always one size too big. And her eyes, sharp as broken glass but never used to cut. They called her the girl with the planner. The quiet one by the door. Never by her name. Claire preferred it that way. Being invisible had become her armor and her power. She knew everything, every lie, every deal, every betrayal that passed through that glass tower. She knew which charity was fake, which surgeon covered up malpractice, which heir snorted the trust fund up his nose. But she never spoke. She wasn't paid to speak. She was paid to know and disappear. Her desk was tucked between the executive boardroom and William's private office, a strategic no man's land where whispers passed like smoke. From there, she watched the world unfold, the smirks, the forced laughs, the tightening of jaws when bonuses were smaller than expected. She watched the empire rot from the inside, quietly, alone. Every holiday party, she stood near the exits. Every company milestone, she clapped from the back. And every time her name was forgotten, she told herself, "That's how I survive." Until one morning, everything changed. She found a photograph, wedged inside an old file drawer behind dusty ledgers and obsolete reports. It was her, 4 years old, sitting alone on a rusty swing at the Pittsburgh State Orphanage. On the back of the photo, 2 handwritten letters, W.H. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Those initials, she knew them too well. William Hargrove. It wasn't a coincidence. That photo didn't end up there by accident. He knew. He had always known. And still, he said nothing. Why? Claire didn't sleep that night. She stared at the photograph for hours, holding it like a wound that had just reopened. For 32 years, she believed her life was an accident of the system. Another forgotten file in the machinery of foster care. She had no last name until the state gave her one. No birthday until a nurse picked a random winter date. Now, in a building worth more than every dollar she had ever earned. In the private drawer of a billionaire's empire. She had proof. He knew. William Hargrove had known who she was for years, long before she ever walked through his doors asking for a job. She'd always wondered why he hired her on the spot, why he ignored her lack of credentials, why he kept her close, but never acknowledged her. And now the pieces were falling into place, not gently, like glass shattering in slow motion. The next morning, she walked into the office and sat at her desk as if nothing had changed, but everything had. Her gaze scanned the walls. The portraits of the Hargrove family lined the hall like museum relics, cold, proud, polished. There was David, the eldest, poised to inherit the company, full of charm and teeth, but dead behind the eyes. There was Melanie, the philanthropist with a foundation built on fraud, and Andrew, the youngest, an addict with access to private jets and NDAs. Claire knew their schedules, passwords, vices. She had booked their abortions, covered their scandals, rescued them from headlines they never read. But not one of them had ever said thank you. Not one had ever asked her name. And suddenly she realized they were protecting something bigger than money, something personal. Claire wasn't just a secretary. She was a liability, an unwanted truth hidden in plain sight. That afternoon, as she poured coffee for a board meeting, William Hargrove entered. Older now, weaker, but still wearing that thin, calculated smile. He looked at her and paused. A flicker of recognition, something old, something buried, danced in his eyes. And then he looked away, as if she were no more than a shadow cast by the corner lamp. Claire sat through the meeting, quiet as always, taking notes. But beneath the calm surface, a storm began to form. A storm born not of anger, but of purpose. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want the Hargrove name. She wanted the truth, and whatever piece of herself had been stolen. The photograph was only the beginning, because somewhere in that building, she knew there was more files, more signatures, maybe even a will, something buried, something real. She didn't know yet what it would cost her to find it, but she knew she couldn't look away anymore. Not now. Not after everything. The halls of the 32nd floor had a sound, not the hum of air vents or the soft clicks of high heels. It was quieter than that. A kind of silence that only exists in buildings filled with power, where money moves behind closed doors and secrets are stored in places no one looks. Claire had lived inside that silence for years, but now she listened differently. Now, every creak of a drawer, every sigh of a door hinge felt like a clue. She started small. Late nights, long after the executives left, she lingered. She knew who stayed late out of guilt and who stayed out of greed. She waited until even the cleaning crews were gone. Then she moved. William's office was protected. Biometric locks, hidden safes, silent alarms. But his assistant's files, the outer ring of his kingdom, those were still paper and drawer. Inside one cabinet, she found folders with unusual stamps, legal terms buried in vague language, non-ascendant contingency clauses, transfer of maternal custodial silence. She read them with the cold discipline of someone used to not blinking. Each phrase felt like a whisper from her past, like someone trying to erase her before she could even begin. There were old letters, too, correspondence between William and a private law firm in Boston. Dates matched the year Claire was adopted. One line froze her. Ensure the girl's name is changed and removed from all familial indexes. Payment follows discretion. She didn't cry, not even then, but something in her chest shifted. Not grief, something sharper, the kind of pain that doesn't beg for sympathy, only justice. She knew she couldn't confront anyone, not yet. In their eyes, she was still just the secretary, still the quiet one who takes notes. So she kept the mask on, polite, distant, invisible, and underneath it all she mapped every inch of that building. She traced the security shifts, the IT server changes, the printing logs. She didn't have allies, just patterns, and patterns told the truth, if you knew where to look. One night, near midnight, she accessed the HR archives. The system required 2 logins, one from HR, one from the executive suite. She had both. She found an internal memo flagged not to be scanned, typed on an old IBM typewriter. Dated October 14th, 1991, the day Claire turned 1. The child will not be legally acknowledged. The inheritance will be redirected to existing heirs. The handwritten will is to be destroyed once the corporate trust is finalized. But someone hadn't destroyed it. Someone had left a trace. That meant one thing. The original will still existed. Somewhere. Claire leaned back in her chair, her eyes wide open now. The building that once felt like a fortress, now felt like a crime scene. And she wasn't just the witness anymore. She was the last living clue. The next morning, Claire entered the building as usual. Hair pulled back, badge clipped, smile practiced. But everything felt different. It wasn't just in her head. The receptionist, usually glued to her phone, looked up a second too long. The security guard asked for her ID, even though they'd known each other for years. The elevator took longer than usual, stopping at random floors. And then it happened. Floor 14. The doors opened and no one got in. But before they closed, she heard it. 2 voices. Soft, clipped, urgent. One said, "Checking access logs again. Someone's been digging." The other, "If she finds the original, it all falls apart." The doors closed. The elevator rose. And Claire's heart didn't beat. It roared. They knew. She kept still the rest of the day. Didn't flinch. Didn't avoid eye contact. But something inside her hardened. A quiet steel rising beneath the fear. She had known this would happen, that searching came with consequences. But hearing the whispers confirmed it. The will existed. And, more importantly, someone else was looking for it too. Someone who wanted it gone. That night, Claire walked home in silence. Not because she didn't want to speak, but because there was no one left she could trust. She passed the glass towers, the neon signs, the overpriced restaurants, all built on the same foundation, a story that wasn't true. William Hargrove had created an empire, not just of business, but of lies. His legacy was a fiction. And Claire, for the first time, saw herself not as an outsider, but as the missing paragraph they tried to erase. She didn't sleep. Instead, she printed everything she had: the letters, the memos, the photo. She stored copies in 3 different locations. One in her freezer, one behind a loose brick in the alley, and one mailed anonymously to a friend from foster care she hadn't spoken to in 10 years, just in case. Because this wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was about survival. She began to notice more. Doors that didn't used to be locked. Staff being reassigned. Security cameras shifting angles. Even her computer had been reset. IT claimed it was routine maintenance. But Claire wasn't naive anymore. They were closing in. Not fast, not loud, but methodically. They thought she would back down, disappear quietly. But what they didn't know was this. Claire had spent her entire life being invisible. Now, for the first time, she was ready to be seen. She wasn't just going to find the will. She was going to make sure the world rid it. And when they did, everything would change. Some people run when they feel hunted. Claire watched. She didn't confront the voices in the elevator. She didn't panic when her files disappeared or her desk drawer was slightly ajar. Instead, she studied the pattern. Fear, after all, is only useful when paired with strategy. She started small. One morning, she printed a single page from the memo she had found. No context, no explanation. Just one line. The child will not be legally acknowledged. She left it half visible in the break room copier tray, between someone's budget report and a sandwich coupon, and waited. That afternoon, an internal meeting was canceled. Claire's login was flagged for unusual behavior, and the next day, the head of compliance, a man who hadn't spoken to her in months, asked how she was enjoying the job. They had seen it. They were watching. Good. Claire didn't want a confrontation. She wanted confirmation, and now she had it. The real power in a building like that wasn't in titles or corner offices. It was in silence, and knowing how to break it without a sound. Over the next week, she dropped 3 more accidents. A time-stamped photo of the handwritten will envelope, partially blurred. A security log showing the vault door accessed after William's death. And a post-it note left on her own desk with 2 typed words. She knows. None of it pointed directly to her, but all of it raised blood pressure. They stopped pretending after that. She noticed a man in a suit she didn't recognize following her outside the office. One night, her apartment door was unlocked. Nothing taken, nothing moved, just unlocked. The message was clear. We see you. But Claire had already lived through worse. Abandonment, foster homes, whispered pity. She'd grown up in a world where no one came to help, and she'd survived by learning one thing. When no one is coming to save you, you become the one who saves yourself. She began her own version of surveillance. Printed floor plans, stairwell cameras, exit routes. She wasn't planning an escape. She was preparing for impact, because eventually someone would confront her. And when they did, she wanted them to believe she had nothing. So she built a lie inside the truth. She stored false leads. She created red herring folders. And then she baited one more trap, the biggest yet. She scheduled a private meeting request through the system. Title: Regarding Legacy Transfer, Urgent. She sent it from the assistant's old login, the one no one had deactivated. The meeting location: Storage Room B, level -1. No cameras, no windows, one door. Then she waited. If they took the bait, she'd know who was behind the cover-up. If they didn't, she'd know they were smarter than she thought. Either way, someone was going to show up. And Claire was done being afraid of shadows. She was ready to meet them in the dark. The storage room was cold, not from the temperature, but from the silence. Claire stood at the door, watching the clock on the wall tick down. Her breath was steady, but her heart, it thundered. She had arranged this carefully. The meeting request, the false leads, the baited trap. And now it was time. Someone would come. Someone had to. But what if they didn't? Claire forced the thought out. She had planned for this moment for too long to falter now. She wasn't just here for the will. She was here to expose the lie that had built this empire, to pull the truth out from the shadows and into the light. The door creaked open. Claire's breath caught. For a split second, she wondered if she'd made a mistake, if it was someone else, someone unimportant. But then the figure stepped inside. It was him, the one person she had hoped she'd never see again. Andrew Hargrove, the nephew, the prodigal son, the one who had disappeared without a trace after William's death, the one no one spoke about. But he was here now, and he was exactly as she remembered. Too calm, too controlled. But his eyes, they were different. Something had changed, something Claire couldn't place. He closed the door behind him, locking it with a soft click. "You've been looking," he said, his voice low but clear. "I'm impressed, Claire. I didn't think you'd have the guts to follow through." Claire didn't flinch. She was past the point of fear. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice steady. Andrew smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Because you found something," he replied. "Something that wasn't meant to be found." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Instead, she gestured toward the table where she had left the files, the ones that were supposed to bait him. He didn't touch them. Not at first. Instead, his gaze locked onto hers. For a moment, they just stood there, a dance of wills. And then the words came out. "The will is only part of it, Claire." His voice was almost apologetic. "But you're not ready to understand what that means yet." Claire's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, closer than she expected. "I'm not here to take what's yours," he said. "I'm here to warn you. The people who are really behind this, they don't play fair. They will do anything to make sure the truth stays buried." A chill ran down Claire's spine. She had always known she wasn't fighting alone. But now, the full weight of it hit her. Andrew continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "And they'll come for you. For everyone you care about. For anyone who stands in their way." Claire stood silent, the gravity of his words settling like a stone in her chest. She had expected this, but the reality of it was something else entirely. What was she really up against? "Who are they?" she asked. The words tasted foreign. She hadn't realized how badly she needed to know. Andrew looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You've already met them." And then he walked toward the door, unlocking it without a sound. Before stepping out, he turned back. The briefest flicker of something, fear, regret, crossed his face. "Good luck, Claire," he said softly, as if he knew exactly what was coming next. And with that, he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, and Claire was left standing in the dim light of the storage room. Alone, but no longer uncertain. She hadn't gotten all the answers she needed, but she had learned one thing for sure. Whoever was behind this, they weren't done with her, and Claire was done being afraid. As she walked out of the storage room and back toward her office, her mind was already racing. She was no longer just a secretary, no longer just a bystander. She had a mission now, and the game had just begun. The game had changed. Claire knew it the moment she stepped back into her office. Andrew's words echoed in her head like a whisper she couldn't shake. "They'll come for you. For everyone you care about." But instead of fear, she felt something else. Something sharp. Something that reminded her of the old life. The one before all of this. Before the power games. Before the lies. It was the same feeling she had when she first stepped into this office, when she'd promised herself she would never be anyone's pawn. She was done being afraid, and now she was ready to play. Claire didn't waste time. She took a breath, steadied her hands, and reached for her phone. The first call was to a contact she hadn't used in months, a journalist, someone with a reputation for digging deep and never letting go, someone who would help her expose the truth. The second call was to a lawyer, a quiet one, someone who understood the importance of timing and discretion. She'd need him when the pieces started to fall into place. The third call was to a former employee who knew more than he let on, someone who could corroborate her suspicions. Claire knew that every little piece of the puzzle would help, every single one. She set the plan in motion. The documents were already ready, locked away in a folder no one would expect to find. But Claire wasn't just looking for the will anymore. She was looking for the truth behind the truth, the corruption that had silently poisoned everything. The people behind William's empire were no longer just faceless enemies. They were pieces of a broken system, a system that had manipulated people like her for years, turned them into nothing more than tools. But no more. Claire wasn't going to burn it down all at once. She had learned the power of patience. She would take it step by step, inch by inch. And when it was all over, the truth would come out, and those who had tried to bury it would finally have to face the consequences. The clock was ticking. She could feel it in the air, the tension, the mounting pressure. She knew the next few hours would decide everything. Would they take the bait? Would they try to shut her down? Or would they make the mistake of thinking she was just a secretary? Claire stepped out of her office and walked down the hallway, her footsteps silent but purposeful. She wasn't trying to be discreet. She was letting them see her. She wanted them to know that she was no longer afraid. It didn't take long for her first move to be noticed. The journalists had already caught wind of the story. The whispers were starting to spread. The board members, who had once ignored her, were now watching her closely, waiting for her to make the next move. Claire had set the stage. She had positioned herself as the threat. And now it was time for them to make their choice. Do they protect their empire, or do they protect their legacy? The hours passed in a blur, the tension building like a storm on the horizon. And then, as the sun began to set, Claire received the call she had been waiting for. It was the lawyer. "They're going to make a move," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "It's time." Claire's pulse quickened. This was it. This was where the game would shift forever. She took a breath, stepped forward, and with one final decisive action, she sent the documents. She released everything. In that moment, she knew the truth would no longer be buried. And when the truth finally came out, it would destroy everything they had built. Every lie, every secret. And Claire. She would be standing on the other side of it all, with nothing but the truth and the freedom to finally walk away. It all came crashing down. The boardroom was quiet. Too quiet. The members of the board sat in their seats, staring at the documents in front of them, unable to believe what they were reading. The truth had come out. The will, the hidden assets, the manipulations. Every single lie had been exposed. And it was all Claire's doing. She watched from the back of the room, her heart pounding, but her face was calm, controlled. She wasn't afraid anymore. Andrew Hargrove was the first to break the silence. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he held the documents. "The will is authentic," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than to anyone else. His eyes flickered to Claire, and for the first time, she saw something she had never seen before. Fear. "I warned you," Claire said softly, stepping into the room. Her voice was calm, but the weight of it landed heavily on everyone present. "Don't make the mistake of underestimating me again." Andrew opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He was lost for words, and Claire had no intention of letting him recover. One by one, the other board members began to understand the depth of what was happening. They had known something was wrong, but they hadn't known how deep the corruption ran. They hadn't realized the full extent of the lies that had built the empire they thought they owned. Claire's breath steadied as she took her place at the head of the table, as if she had always belonged there. "This company was built on secrets," she began, her voice unwavering. "It wasn't just about the money. It was about power, manipulation. and for years I've been just one of the victims in a game that I never chose to play." The faces around the table were a mix of shock, regret, and anger. But none of them could say a word. None of them had a leg to stand on. The documents Claire had released were airtight. There was no denying the truth now. The will was only the beginning. The fraud, the cover-ups, the mismanagement, all of it was laid bare. "You all thought I was just the secretary," Claire continued, her voice now rising with the weight of the years of mistreatment. "But I've always known more than you think. I've always been watching. And now it's my turn to control the game." Andrew looked like he might explode, but Claire was already 3 steps ahead of him. She had arranged everything: the journalists, the lawyers, the evidence. It was all there. No one could stop her now. "You can't just take this from us," one of the board members said, his voice trembling. "We built this company. You can't just—" "I didn't take anything," Claire interrupted. "I'm giving it back to the people who deserve it." The room was tense, but Claire knew it was over. The people in this room had spent years manipulating the system, ruling with lies and deceit. But it was all about to fall apart, and when it did, they would have no one to blame but themselves. "Your time is up," Claire said, standing tall and locking eyes with each of them in turn. "You can walk away now, or you can face the consequences." She turned and left the room, leaving behind a company on the brink of collapse. The next few days were a blur. Claire watched as the media exploded with the story. The truth about the company, the corruption, the hidden will, it was all out there, and nothing could put it back together. The board members were fired. The executives who had betrayed her were exposed, and the company, the empire that had once been untouchable, was torn apart by its own greed. But as the dust settled, Claire felt nothing but relief. She hadn't done this for revenge. She hadn't done it to destroy them. She had done it because the truth deserved to be known. And in the end, the only thing that mattered was that she had found it. The truth. And with that truth, she had set herself free. As Claire sat alone in her office, looking out the window, she realized she was no longer the person she had been when she first walked into this building. She was no longer just a secretary. She was the one who had changed everything. She had taken control of her own destiny. And, for the first time in a long time, she smiled. The end was just the beginning. Claire didn't just find the truth. She used it to rebuild her life and expose the secrets that many had tried to hide. Her battle was not about revenge, but about finding her own strength. In the end, she not only changed her destiny, but also the world around her. Claire's story reminds us that sometimes the real victory lies in being true to yourself, even when no one is looking. Bye-bye.